He is unfortunately the completely wrong person to play this character. I can't lie to y'all, it's a serious topic today and it's gonna be a doozy, so please lock in with me. I have so many thoughts, so many feelings, just a general dissatisfaction that's been growing in size since I left the theater of this film. So I had to talk about it. It's a controversial topic and I'm a little nervous, but I want to try my best to handle it with care and speak in a way that is considerate and valuing of the conversation at hand. Wish me luck, because we gotta talk about Jonathan Majors. Before I get started, what's up everyone? My name is Mars Hogan, and if you don't know me already and haven't been on this channel, I am the something something film guy, and I talk everything cinema, television, entertainment, and all the like here on this channel. Now usually I would be downstairs in my living room doing some of these parts, but got a lot of going on in the house. We've got a brand new puppy that is down there napping. I don't want to go and disturb him because then he's going to disturb me. So we're not gonna do that. We're gonna switch it up a little bit, chill out in the office for this video. That's why the scenery looks a little different and is gonna stay kind of around this general area. But anyways, I'm so glad you're tuning in, and I sincerely hope that you enjoy this video. And if you do, please do me a solid and like the video, drop a comment with your thoughts, which I'm sure a lot of people will have, and subscribe to the channel if this content is your jam. Thank you in advance for that. Now let's get back into the video. Now I can't lie, this is tough to kind of navigate. It's a really expansive and nuanced conversation that we have at play when it comes to Jonathan Majors and the issues that have surrounded him and his career in the past few years. If you've been living under a rock, back in 2023, Jonathan Majors was charged with assault in a domestic abuse case with his then girlfriend at the time, a woman by the name of Grace Jabari, and he was convicted of misdemeanor assault and harassment in December of that same year. Now, prior to this, Majors was the talk of the town all over Hollywood. He had two huge roles that year, one in Creed and then another one in Ant-Man Quantumania as Kang the Conqueror, which was poising him to be the next major villain in the MCU, probably for years to come, being that Kang is such a huge character in the comics. But all of this and everything really for him fell apart when he was accused of his crimes, and he was dropped by Marvel and essentially ousted from Hollywood as a whole. And that brings us to Magazine Dreams, the film that was kind of being publicized in the recent media as his comeback work. And I believed it too after I saw the trailer. Majors plays this aspiring bodybuilder, Killian Maddox, who struggles socially and has an extreme obsession with being a professional bodybuilder and getting on a magazine cover. So much so that he juices off steroids, does coke to heighten the energy of his workouts, and is infatuated with how his body looks. And I've got to be completely honest, Majors was phenomenal in this role. Drama surrounding him aside, his acting ability is not at all in question. He embodies Killian Maddox in every way you can think of. Of course, obviously his physique is a perfect fit already to play this specific type of character. He dominates space on screen, and more than that, he enhances the personality of Killian, this very intense man with these weird quirks that sort of underscore his instability. He plays this rage really well because it's very loose and chaotic, which is really the essence of the character. This is one of the most spot-on portrayals of a character that I've seen in a very, very long time. So with all that going for it, what's the problem? Well, to me, it starts with how the story gets told and lands with who Majors is and his real life issues. This film tackles some really serious things, but it doesn't do it with much care and attention and not with very much depth. It offers us a lot to think about, but it doesn't say enough about the subject matter that it feels like it's attempting to tackle. And the storyline leaves a lot to be desired, which causes an emptiness in the narrative and an inconclusive kind of direction for where this very well performed character is actually going. And maybe that's the chaos that the character is, that we're supposed to experience as a representation of the movie as a whole. But It unfortunately makes for a mess of a film that is hard to feel invested in as we get deeper into it. What bothers me about this film is that there is very little follow through on these very delicate subjects, which makes for an all-around mishandling of them. The first major instance that stuck out to me was right before Killian meets Jessie, a girl that he likes that works at the same grocery store as him, for a date. Outside the restaurant, we see these two black girls who look at him as he's kind of hyping himself up in the car, talking to himself or whatever, and they laugh at him. Clearly it affects him, and it's obvious that it's something that he has experienced before. But this moment really rubbed me the wrong way. There is definitely a conversation to be had here, a controversial one, but one regardless. The idea of black men who aren't accepted by black women because they're different or weird or whatever else is a big talking point in current cultural dialogue between both sides. And there's the idea here that this is why they choose women of other races. I think this is incredibly nuanced in real life, not something that we can apply sweeping statements to in any way, but there's definitely an opportunity in the film to make a statement on this topic. I think yes, as an audience, we can assume that's why he's interested in Jessie, and maybe that he had bad connections in the past. But to me, that doesn't connect the dots and make for a relevant moment in the film. There's no real exploration of his experience in this way. If we, for example, got to him sitting with Jessie and her kind of having any reaction to him as a black man, or him openly sharing any of his thoughts on relationships or anything at all, it would have made a bit more sense. Oddly enough, Jessie says she told her dad about him, and there was no mention of race in that moment at all. And I'm completely fine with not having the conversation about race or making that a thing at all. But in presenting it this way, it becomes less of a thoughtful consideration and more of a poor attempt at communicating the black male struggle. And it frames black women in a certain light for absolutely no reason. And that's really it. That's the major problem. There's no reason for it. It goes nowhere in the larger narrative and has no meaningful impact on the grand scheme of the story. Sure, it's a tick into the box of Killian's anger or dissatisfaction with life, but any and everything can serve that purpose. The film would be no different with or without this moment. I wouldn't be mad at saying what it's alluding to, that he chooses white women because black women don't appreciate him. I wouldn't agree, but I wouldn't be mad at making that statement. But since you don't, you kind of have this scene play out for nothing in the film. Even worse, the entire relationship dynamic completely disappears after this when Jessie leaves him at dinner, never to be seen again, like in the whole movie. And this comes on the heels of him talking about how his father killed his mother and talking about his obsession with his eating and who he wants to become. Jessie is clearly afraid of him and disturbed by his presence, and she abandons him moments later. It essentially just lands us in the same place. Laugh, no laugh, it's not like he gets the girl. And then him picking up the black prostitute later on just doubles down on the pointlessness of that original moment. It's just more damaging in its messaging than it is relevant to anything the film is saying, and that's the issue. If you're going to put it in, you should do something with it. You should make a statement, one that is genuine, but a statement at the very least. This brings me to the next and probably craziest moment for me in the film, when he meets Brad, who is this bodybuilder that Killian idolizes throughout the whole movie. He meets this man that he sent probably 1,000 letters to, and he's just like, oh, your physique is so crazy. And there's this moment that was weird at first where he like touched his abs and was really like into it. And my wife and I were sitting there like looking at each other, and we were like, hold on. What is happening right now? Are we going here right now? And it's just like, nah, they're not doing that. Majors isn't doing that. That's not what's happening. And then it went exactly there. You guessed it. And if you didn't, the very next scene, Brad just had sex with Killian. Again, such a huge conversation to be had here about the intersection of excessive masculinity and sexuality, homosexuality specifically, what can be said about Killian's identity? This obsession that he has with being this bodybuilder, is it really his obsession with trying to force feed himself masculinity that he doesn't actually feel or have inside? And we get the call he makes to Brad about the incident between them, where he's kind of claiming that he was taken advantage of. And that's even crazier, but there's nothing more that gets explored from this. What happens in the film is he shadows it with anger and violence, and he thinks about and plays out and almost gets to killing Brad in an overall defiance of everything he's been trying to do for the entire movie. And in a way, does it push the actual happenings of the story forward? Yes, it does. However, it doesn't offer any additional depth to Killian's character, and it doesn't move our character development forward. And it could have been a hugely impactful dialogue to have, but it amounts to so little. This is really dropping the ball to me. Like, why do we even have that happen? Like, why? Like, what's the point if nothing further is going to be explored about this major incident? And again, it does send Killian kind of spiraling, but I think there's a way to make the interaction with Brad negative enough to do that without bringing a sexual relationship into it. And I think bringing that in can make for a really valuable conversation in a film like this, but you have to get that talk going, and they don't. It was a really shocking moment when it happened, yes, definitely, but that's all it really amounted to in the narrative and in Killian's development as a character. Shock value, or at the very most, just another notch in his instability, which is way too little for what it could have been and what I think it should have been, because it's not like he ever questions or even gives any space to thinking about his sexual identity after this moment. He doesn't seem to like it, but then what was the reason for it happening in the first place? If he got taken advantage of, how was that the case? Or let's dive deeper into how he actually feels and not just spend a momentary phone call on it. It really deflates the purpose of having this in the story. If you're going to bring it in, I feel like it's important to be thoughtful about it. That's real, a real life kind of thing that men in that space experience when they're not all the way sure of their sexuality. Not the taking advantage of, but just the questioning. That kind of hyper-masculinity to mask or compensate for a sexual identity that is more taboo and probably less accepted in the spaces that they're in. And again, we kind of have little inlets into this idea, like the call and like his general anger, but nothing substantial that really speaks to that struggle, that really explores his character in any meaningful way. And I think it's a poor decision to include something of such substance just to minimize it to a singular moment of shock and awe. It has the opposite effect. It's another missed opportunity that draws us further away from this character and ends up feeling very empty and, to me, kind of tasteless in the handling of it in the movie. And yeah, I just really don't like how they do it. More than that even is the overall fear of his blackness that the movie tries to dig into. I think there's a solid attempt here, but it's still a bit short on the uptick. I think this is different because we kind of connect to it in different moments in different ways. Like, for example, earlier in the film, the woman that clutches her purse next to him in the grocery store at the meat counter, or the conversation on his body that he had with the prostitute. Mainly, I think it comes up in the incident at the diner. Early in the film, he spazzes out and absolutely destroys this hardware store because the people did a poor job at painting his grandfather's home. This starts a chain of events that results in him getting attacked and beat up by one of the owners of the store. It's really brutal and obviously like racially charged. They call him a monkey and all these other kind of things, and it throws off completely Killian trying to go to his bodybuilding competition at that time. So later after this, he sees one of those men in a diner and he's with his family, and he has this kind of monologue and just portrays himself as this big scary black guy, kind of matter-of-factly trying to make a statement about his presence being a threat for people. And it's a culmination of this sentiment that's been underscored throughout most of the film. So we're presented with this very significant topic, and it is approached over the course of the film, so I definitely do appreciate that being a part of this narrative. But honestly, to me, it's still just not enough. And this may be a personal perspective, being that I am a black man, however light-skinned I may be, that has dealt with this kind of treatment to a much lesser extent. So here's the thing. Presenting this conversation is nearly meaningless if you're not putting real vocality to the perspective, because we're shown these instances and we can somewhat string them together on our own as an audience, but the film doesn't really say anything about them being wrong, right, or indifferent. Maybe it's meant to be up to interpretation, but I don't think that's the kind of way we need to speak on this subject. This topic, along with the other ones, are not ones that you should put in a narrative and then not kind of draw a line on where it stands and what's meant to be felt or understood from them. They're just too important for that, in my opinion. And this is how we kind of horseshoe the issues of this film into the problematic nature of its existence. Because while Jonathan Majors legitimately carried this movie with his performance, there's no doubt about that. He is, unfortunately, the completely wrong person to play this character, at least currently. This is way too close to home, way too close to the real life controversy that he is currently dealing with. And it does not help his case, in my opinion. His acting is fantastic, yes, but I think it's not the best light to see him in as of right now, as this hyper-obsessed, hyper-masculine, hyper-violent enigma type of person. Like, let's circle back to the first major story flaw that I brought up, the black girls who laughed at him. I think it's problematically fitting because Grace Jabari, the woman who he's been convicted of domestic violence against, is a white woman. And the conversation surrounding his incident quickly became a racial issue, and it didn't stop there. In addition to this, he's now engaged to none other than Megan Good, one of the most sought after black women in like black culture, and their relationship came off the heels of this incident's occurrence. Are you kind of seeing the play here? The way his real life lines up with this aspect of the story is uncanny, especially given the fact that I believe this movie was done before his incident occurred. But given the situation and given the fact that editing is a thing, why would you attach that particular scene to him again if it's not going to be meaningful in a major way to the actual story? Part of me feels like the film was put out in the face of everything that Majors is dealing with and is intentionally meant to be drawn with conclusions to his actual life. But for someone who is trying to put this past behind him, is that very smart? Is it wise to put out a movie that envisions you as an angry, hyper-aggressive, low impulse control black man with obsessive tendencies, right as you have been recently convicted of stalking a woman and being aggressive with her? Is that really the best idea? Forget how good your acting is, because that does and should take a back seat to the real life controversy surrounding your name. This movie felt to me as if it were playing in the face of what he did. And even though I definitely don't believe that to be the intention, because again, I think it came before all of his troubles, I do think that putting out, knowing what all Majors has been through and knowing what the movie's subject matter is and how just some of the things are handled in it, knowing all of that is at least to some degree a bit reckless. And I understand, you had this film done, it was an acting clinic by you, and it is a decent enough film, but really it shows your immense talent for what you do, so you want to have it out. Like, I get that. And then your incident occurs, movie gets clipped, you get canceled, and now you have an opportunity again to come back and put it out. Like, you're going to want to do that, so I understand, especially after waiting a very, very long time. I think it was 2-3 years that this movie has been held, and especially after you had such a strong performance, because in all honesty, you need to be seen and be valued again. I understand all of that, but I think there should have been a deeper thought process done with this specific storyline. Make some changes, cut some things, take it back into the edit and make it a little bit more palpable to your situation. I can't say it would have helped you altogether, because right when this dropped, a very damaging phone recording from that incident came out and really brought him right back into that moment where he was seen as an abuser. So This might all be for naught, but I think you would have at least had a better film, and at the most been able to be just seen for your talent and not seen as aggressive and unhinged, which is exactly what you don't want in your current situation. And this all brings me to my final point, which is a huge conversation that I'm going to try to have with some care and consideration, because it's a tough question to ask. When do we forgive Jonathan Majors? And I say when, not if, for a reason, because I do believe at some point that Majors should be able to be redeemed as a person and as an actor. Some people may not agree, and I think the advent of cancel culture doesn't really speak to anybody being able to be uncanceled. It seems to just kind of happen when you do something that people like again. Think someone like Kanye West, who's gotten canceled more times than he can probably count. But when that album drops, people listen and people support, and he's back in good graces up until he does some more stupid shit that gets him back on the chopping block. At this point, he's out of here, but that's a whole other thing. What I don't like about that is that that shouldn't be the barometer for acceptance. If you do something wrong, it's your responsibility to reconcile that, and it shouldn't be your talent that gets you back in good graces. It should be your remorse, your efforts to change, to be better, to right the wrong, so to speak. That's how we should judge whether we want to forgive someone or not. And also, I'm not sure if it's up to us to judge, but it is a fact that audience have an influence. Studios do as well, or whoever the powers that be are. We've seen this in how the film was released. It was almost kind of hidden, which I guess I shouldn't have found super surprising, but finding a showtime for this movie was not easy. Most of the theaters in my area, most being like 2 to 3 out of the over 20, only had showtimes that were late in the evening when this movie came out. Like after 10 p.m., 10:15, 10:30, 10:50, that was the showtimes. And not only that, but it quickly left theaters after its release as well. So very few theaters showed it at very few times, and they didn't keep the movie very long. However, the theater I went to see it in was kind of packed. Oh, I forgot to mention, it was also showing in the smallest rooms available at any theater, but still, it was a pretty full room. I've seen mixed receptions for the film, but it seems like there are people who want to go and give the movie a chance. But there's definitely a bit of hesitation at a macro level with its distribution, but also at a micro level with the conversation around him and the movie. I also think it important to notate here that he has been getting some quiet, albeit influential support in Hollywood as well. Michael B. Jordan has echoed support for him. Matthew McConaughey has spoken out on his behalf. Even Whoopi Goldberg, which I thought was kind of random. But the point is, there have been rumblings on his behalf, even in the midst of the still persistent drama around him. There's been rumors of him getting back with Marvel even, but I haven't been able to confirm that officially at this point. I think though, before we get to support, before the Hollywood gatekeepers decide to let him back in, there's still a big question that is at the forefront of the situation that Majors faces. Can we say that he has actually shown remorse or tried to change and be better? In my lowly opinion, I'm not so sure about that. See, he said originally that he didn't commit any physical harm to his ex-girlfriend who had the case on him, but the phone call that I mentioned earlier that came out right before the movie was set to be released has him admitting that he has pushed her and that he has put his hands around her neck. So if that call is to be believed, then you've already lied about what you've done. Then there's the whole fight that he broke up, which I thought was silly and looked staged if I'm being honest. And we don't know that, but it just didn't really help anything to me. And it seemed a little bit too convenient timing wise with his kind of like PR revival sort of situation that he had going on. Then there was his interview where he took a bit of accountability, but also mentioned that he himself was abused as a child. Now, this is definitely something where I want to be careful because I can't and shouldn't say whether or not something happened to him. And that's not really why I bring it up anyway. It's more so about the aspect of accountability. I think these two things have to remain separate. And if you're going to take accountability for something else, you can't do it with an asterisk. It has to be full and honest accountability. By all means, if you want to share something challenging from your life, you have every right to do that and should be heard and understood. But to bridge it in a conversation about you being accountable for damage you've done, it just distorts the feeling of it entirely. If we're being honest, I'm not sure if it was time for Majors to be able to make a comeback. I'm not sure if he has done the work. I'm not sure if he feels remorseful. I'm not sure if he has changed or is changing and wants to be better. I don't know, and because I don't know, I think this may be too soon for him. I think that he needs to continue to do more and continue to try and be better. What I will say though is I'm not sure the punishment he's received is altogether equitable with counterparts from his industry who have done similar or worse things. And I'm not going to get into naming names and slinging mud, but I think there is a clear understanding here of the difference between the Jonathan Majors situation and other negative situations in Hollywood. One in particular that was a big topic of conversation around the same time as Majors' issues, featuring two prominent figures in Hollywood. If you know, you know. I'm not gonna say no more than that. And of course, the question that always is there, is it race? And I'm not someone who likes to make everything about race, but I think it's naive not to recognize how prominent of a role it plays in so many different things. Like, how would this have turned out differently if Majors was a white man? Or if Grace was a black woman? Or if both those things were true? Would he have lost his cornerstone role with Marvel? Would he have even been canceled? History in Hollywood has shown us that doing bad things isn't always immediately taken action upon, for some of the biggest names no less. It's shown us that Hollywood has a tendency to look the other way, to ignore wrongdoing when they like a person or that person has talent. And I don't think that Majors deserves that treatment, not at all, but I also don't think that anyone else should get it either. I think time will tell as we look at Majors and his career if he actually gets the redemption that I believe he will eventually be able to earn with change behavior, of course. I don't think that things you do should necessarily stick with you forever or prevent you from being a normal person again. If we're to believe that the justice system is supposed to reform, even though it often does the exact opposite, then it is supposed to be an understanding that we have with crime and punishment. Once you do your sentence, you should be allowed to come back into society a better person. This is less about career and how people view you as a famous person, but I think we should base our understanding off of right and wrong, and not off of popularity and likeness and talent. The door should at least be open once someone has done their time, so to speak, and then it becomes up to them to do the work to walk through it. In Majors' case, I think he still has that work to do. And I hope that he does it. And I hope that he does become a better person. And I hope that he does learn from his wrongdoings. And when all that happens, and when he has shown remorse and made efforts to reconcile, I hope that he can be given the opportunity to have a career again. Magazine Dreams was probably what he felt like would be that moment for him, but I think it was just not the right time and not the right choice. But that doesn't necessarily mean that he can't or shouldn't try again. You just have to do it the right way. And the right way is by being a better person before you even think about being a great actor. Thank you so much everyone out there for watching this video. I had a hard time thinking about how I wanted to navigate this topic, so hopefully I handled it properly. If you feel like I didn't though, I'd definitely like to know how maybe I could have changed my approach to this conversation, or if there are different things I should have said or conveyed, or whatever you think I could have improved upon. You can drop it in the comments or hit me on any of my socials if you want to have a more direct conversation. I'm more than open to anyone who wants to have discourse, for anyone who wants to offer constructive criticism, because I ultimately just want to connect what I feel is a positive message and talk about films and everything around them in my videos. So please take some time and let me know what you think. Again, thank you everyone for tuning in. I'm always so glad to have the support of even one person on this channel and for these videos. It really helps to keep me going on this journey. As always, if you like the video, go ahead and drop a like down there. And if this content is your jam, I know I'm saying that again, but go ahead and make sure you subscribe and also hit that notification bell so that you're not missing any videos from me in the future. And again, drop a comment with any thoughts you have at all, or reach out to me at any of my socials, which will be on the screen somewhere at some point. One last time, thank y'all for being here. Peace.